If you were always reading your older sister's diary, this is the list for you. Hi, welcome, come on in. My name is Aoife, and today I am taking you through some of my favorite epistolary books. This is a really specific way of telling stories and laying out your story, but it is not told in straight prose. Instead, it's told in the form of letters, of diary entries, of texts, emails. Any kind of written correspondence is going to appear on this list. First mention has to go to one of the books of a generation, and that is The Princess Diaries by Meg Cabot. This is following Mia, who is 14 years old when her parents sit her down to tell her that she isn't just Mia from New York. She is actually Amelia Mignonette Thermopolis Rinaldi, a princess of Genovia, a tiny little country on the coast of Europe. I ate these books up whole when I was younger. Michael and Mia were my first shipped couple. Before I had even figured out what shipping people actually meant, I was so on board with their relationship. I also really enjoyed watching Mia grow up through life, breakups, friendship breakups, finding new friends, figuring out who it was, and basically trying to get self-actualized while also figuring out how to be the princess of a tiny little country in Europe. I really loved these books. The movies don't necessarily stay super true to the source material, but they are still such a phenomenal watch, even just for Anne Hathaway and Julie Andrews. A big swerve in tone is The Diary of Anne Frank by Anne Frank. This is the true story of Anne and her family's time hiding from the Nazis in a tiny little house. Not even the house itself, just a tiny little annex. I think it was in an attic in Amsterdam. It takes place over the course of about 3 years or so, and she spends her time writing to Kitty, which is what she names her diary, and it takes you from when Anne and her family were living in Frankfurt, up to when they had moved to the Netherlands, to when they went into hiding, and up to their eventual capture. One of the most harrowing lines I think I've ever read in a book is "This diary ends here." And this is when you know that Anne has been captured, that everybody's security has been compromised, and she has been taken off to the concentration camp. It's one of the most harrowing and hard-hitting books I think I've ever read, but it will also give you a really good understanding of what it was like for people who had go through all of these things back in the 1940s. My next recommendation is Bridget Jones' Diary by Helen Fielding, and this is having a bit of a moment right now because of the release of the film Mad About the Boy, but the time really goes back to the 1990s with the release of the first ever book. This is actually based on a fictionalized newspaper column that Helen Fielding used to write in the UK, where she imagined herself as the character Bridget Jones and things that she would have gone through working in publishing, trying to lose weight, trying to stop drinking, trying to stop smoking, trying to live a little bit of a healthier lifestyle, and also dating around London. I find Bridget to be a little bit complex, but really interesting to read. She has these really interesting ways of looking at the world, and she's such a phenomenally funny person, even without trying to be sometimes. It's one of my favorite books to just dip back into now and then, but there is quite a lot of body dysmorphia in this book. When Bridget weighs about 10 stone, which is 140 or so pounds, Bridget thinks that she is teetering towards being overweight. When, if you think about Bridget's actual body dimensions, she was probably like a stick figure. It's the whole thing that we had gone through in the 90s and noughties of you are incredibly overweight just because you might have pounded on 1 or 2 because you were eating a lot over Christmas. Another teenage must-have is the Georgia Nicholson series by Louise Renison. I am so devastated that we lost Louise Renison about 10 or so years ago, because we're never going to find out what Georgia is getting up to as an adult properly. But Georgia and the Ace Gang were stalemates of my teenage reading, and I absolutely loved it because, unlike The Princess Diaries, these books were set in the UK. So they were a lot of things that I was going through as well. Having lived in such close proximity to the UK, it was a lot of things that I was familiar with. It was a lot of pop culture that I was used to. It was a lot of things that I had known growing up watching British TV, growing up listening to British music, reading British magazines. It was just such a familiar world to me that seeing it all laid out in the pages of a book were just phenomenal. I will still remember all of the different words that they had to describe things, like Scalag 14 was their school, and Hamburger Go-Go Land was the US, and Kiwi Go-Go Land was New Zealand, where George's father moves to. And their scale of things that you can do with boys and how advanced your relationship gets when you're going from just being interested in him to going completely all the way. I loved those books. They are a little bit chaotic because Georgia herself is a little bit chaotic, but they have got such a firm place in my heart. A book that is set just after the Second World War and that has also been made into a movie is The Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society by Mary Ann Schaeffer. This was actually finished posthumously by another writer because Mary Ann Schaeffer passed away about 60 or so percent into writing the book. This is following Juliet, who is a journalist working in London, and she's kind of going through writer's block at the moment. Nothing is really striking her in terms of something that she wants to write, but inspiration has finally struck, in the form of a letter that she has received from a young man living in Guernsey. This is one of the Channel Islands, which is owned by the UK, but is much closer to the coast of northern France. And during their correspondence, Juliet learns a lot about the people of Guernsey, how they had dealt with the war, and how they are coming out of everything that had happened. The book is completely devastating. I haven't seen the movie yet, but I have a feeling it's going to absolutely blow me away. And this is definitely one for the history lovers. Where in Was End by Cecilia Ahern, also known as Loved Rosie, was also made into a movie, and this one is slightly different from the movie because while the film is set in the US or the UK, the book takes place in Dublin. This is following Alex and Rosie, who met each other on their first day of school and have been firm friends ever since. But life has taken them in completely different directions, with studying abroad, with parenting, with the challenges of being a young and single parent, with parental expectations and familial expectations, with a career that is starting to snowball out of their reach, but they have never lost contact with one another. And they have always wondered what it would be like if things on that one night when they were 18 went differently, and if their lives hadn't diverged, would they be in a different position than they are right now? I think this was one of the first epistolary novels that I had ever read, and I just fell in love with how quirky I found the style. So this is definitely one to go back into now and then. Music lovers should definitely check out Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid, particularly if your style of music is Fleetwood Mac, because this book is a relatively fictionalized version of the band. It follows Daisy Jones, who comes to notoriety as the lead singer of The Six, a band that has kind of plucked her from obscurity and performing around clubs around Los Angeles. They have written one huge hit single, performed on a couple of TV shows, released an album, and then after one huge concert have never been seen again. But a couple of years later, the band is ready to tell their story. And they are doing so in the form of an interview and a documentary. What you are reading is the transcript of this documentary, all done out in interview style. And if you listen to the audiobook, it is done as a full cast. This is one of the best audiobooks I think I've ever read, and I think it is the full cast of this that truly makes it what it is. All of the voices are so distinct and unique, and every reader of it is so talented at getting the point across. And as Taylor Jenkins Reid does, there is a little bit of something that you might not expect coming at the end. Ella Minnow P by Mark Dunn is a really interesting one and is particularly good for lovers of language and linguistics. It is set on Nollop, a fictional island off the coast of South Carolina, which was named after Nevin Nollop. He was the person who first coined the famous pangram, "The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog." A pangram is a sentence that uses every single letter in the English alphabet, and the people here have really made this their personality. There is a huge celebration of that pangram, particularly to the point that it is plastered everywhere in town, but in big gold letters in front of the town hall. One day, some of the letters start to come loose and fall off the sign. The townspeople decide that this is a sign that they need to stop using those letters. And so, as you keep reading the book, these letters start to disappear. From context, you can figure out what it is that's going on, and you can figure out the words, particularly when some of them might be similar to other words in the English language, for example, those or these. But as you go further into the book, and as more letters start to fall off, more letters start to disappear in the book too. This is told in such a unique and quirky way, it fast became one of my favorite books. You might not think it straight off, but The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood is also an epistolary novel. In the epilogue of the book, it is revealed that this is the transcript of a tape that Offred had been putting together, and that they had interviewed Offred after the fall of Gilead, and this is her account of what actually happened. The Handmaid's Tale is one of the most well-known dystopian novels out there. It is following Offred, who lives in the country of Gilead. This is now what North America used to be, and the world of Gilead is completely different to what North America used to be. In Gilead, women no longer have rights, they no longer have jobs, they no longer hold bank accounts, they are no longer able to own property. In fact, women are seen as property themselves, and they are only able to hold 3 specific jobs. They can be a Martha, who is the person who is taking care of the house, taking care of the children. They can be a wife, so the wife of somebody of importance in the country. Or they can be a handmaid. And a handmaid is basically seen as a concubine, where once a month their owner will come into the room and have sex with them in the hopes that this will provide with a child. The world of Gilead is completely terrifying, and if you are seeing a couple of things that are starting to look a little bit real, you might not be too far off. The Appeal by Janice Hallett is one of those really interesting books in that you are not only reading about a crime that has happened, but you are actively tasked with figuring out what it was. The Appeal takes place in a small little town in England where the Fairway Players are going to be putting on a production of All My Sons by Arthur Miller. As well as all of this, there is an entire cast of characters, and you need to figure out who isn't exactly what they seem, who it is that has been murdered, who it is that murdered them, who it is that knows about the murder more than they are letting on, why everything happened in the first place, and somebody has gone to jail for it erroneously, and you need to figure out who it is. You're not figuring this out on your own though. There are 2 law students with you, Femi and Charlotte, who are going through all of the notes that their professor has found and put together so that they can try and figure out what it is that has happened. This book gripped me in a way that a book hasn't for such a long time. I remember vividly sitting down on my couch after work one day and thinking, you know what, I'm going to get through like 50 pages and then I'll go and make dinner or I'll go for a walk. I did not get off that chair until 2:30 the following morning. I could not put that book down until I knew what it was that happened. Finally, one for the book lovers everywhere is 84 Charing Cross Road by Helen Hanff. This follows the true life story of Helen, a freelance writer living in New York, and Frank, a used bookshop owner living in London. The 2 of them have never met one another. They are separated by culture, they are separated by geography, but they have got such a strong bond and friendship. They meet each other in the classified pages of a newspaper, and what follows from there is a bunch of letters going every way across the Atlantic, keeping each other informed with what they're reading, what they've been doing in life, and just growing their friendship together. It's such a beautiful book that any book lover is going to absolutely love. Those are some epistolary novels that I genuinely think you need to go and check out. Have you ever read an epistolary novel, or is this style of storytelling just not for you? If you'd love to leave me a comment but you can't think of anything you'd like to say, then just leave me the pen writing emoji. Don't forget to like and subscribe because I have new videos up every week. Now, get on out of here.